The following program is classified PG. It contains adult themes. Channel 7 recommends parental guidance for young viewers.
Tonight, it's on again. The North Coast bracing for more flooding, rains and storms. Hope among the ruins after a little boy is pulled from the rubble in Nepal. The wrong answer that led to this petrol station attack. And Jared Haynes studying hard to learn all the NFL plays at the 49ers training.
This is Prime7 News at 6:30 with Daniel Gibson.
Good evening. Exhausted SES volunteers are now heading back to the state's north, where residents are preparing for more damaging wild weather over the next few days. Rainfall's expected to intensify overnight from the Central Coast right through to Queensland as another powerful east coast low develops and a risk of flooding.
The Sandbag Brigade has swung into action in Coffs Harbour. It's dry now, but residents know that's about to change.
It's looking pretty bad from the weather report, but whether it happens, who knows.
Some parts of the mid-north coast have already copped a drenching. The SES in Woolai is preparing for flash flooding. 125 millimetres of rain have already fallen, 100 in Lennox Head, 95 in Ballina, Evans Head 91. And there's plenty more to come as conditions deteriorate into the weekend.
By the time this event's finished, as we get towards Sunday, many places will have picked up 100 to 200 millimetres.
But isolated falls of up to 350 millimetres are possible, anywhere from the Queensland border to Port Macquarie. The biggest danger, rising rivers.
And we still have over 13 river systems that have flood warnings and watches on them, 6 of those with major flooding, and out of those there's a 70% chance of flooding.
This east coast low pressure system won't be as intense as last week's deadly superstorm, but authorities are warning it will still be dangerous.
Under no circumstances should they walk, ride or drive through floodwaters, even go down and sightsee.
Further south in the Hunter, they're still cleaning up from last week's damage. The SES is desperate to clear around 1,000 jobs before the weekend. Volunteers are weary, but soldiering on.
We have volunteers coming in from the ACT, from Queensland, from Tasmania, from Victoria.
Ready for the rain and the phones to start ringing again. Kath Turner, 7 News.
Electricity prices are set to drop by up to $300 a year after the National Energy Regulator ordered power companies to slash their revenue. It means an end to the so-called gold plating of the poles and wires network, but also threatens thousands of jobs.
Examining her bills, Borkham Hill's mother of 3, Claire Pendlebury, realises just how much electricity can shock the household budget.
If you look back at your bills from 3 years ago, you realise how much they have gone up.
Relief is on the way. The Australian Energy Regulator has slashed the amount power companies are allowed to spend.
If they spend more than the money that we have allowed them, then that has to come from the owners and not from consumers.
It means prices should fall by between 5 and 12% next year. Ausgrid customers in Sydney will save 8% or an average $165, 5% for Endeavour customers or an average $106, while country customers with essential energy will see a drop of almost 12% or $313.
The third year in succession that we will achieve real reductions.
The government had argued against the savings, warning the power assets they had wanted to privatise would be worthless. Today, it was happy to take the credit.
We share their commitment to a safe and reliable electricity supply for customers at the lowest sustainable price.
What would not be sustainable, however, if power companies are to cut costs, is the number of people they employ. It's estimated some 2,500 workers will lose their jobs.
I'd like the networks to work with the unions to minimise job losses.
The government hopes to make $13 billion by putting poles and wires up for lease later this year. Robert Ovadia, 7 News.
Opposition leader Bill Shorten stands accused of cheap politics over the Bali Nine, just a day after the execution of Andrew Chan and Myron Sukumaran. He claims the government has watered down guidelines for federal police dealing with Australians who could face the death penalty overseas. The government, well, they're outraged and say the claim is rubbish.
Indonesia's ambassador slips quietly back into Canberra.
Ambassador!
In no mood to speak, Ambassador Najib gave the media the slip at Canberra Airport, leaving through a side door. Seven's cameras caught up with him at the Indonesian embassy.
Ambassador!
Returning a day before our ambassador to Indonesia is recalled in protest at the executions, as Labor is accused of playing politics with the deaths, claiming the government's watered-down rules governing the way federal police deal with Australians accused of crimes overseas that carry the death penalty.
The current government has reversed some of the protocols that were put into place to try and prevent the tragedy which we saw happen in the early hours of yesterday morning.
Mr Shorten says Justice Minister Michael Keenan's ministerial directive to the AFP no longer includes a specific reference to Australia's opposition to the death penalty. But these AFP guidelines on international police-to-police assistance in death penalty situations certainly do in very great detail. They were put in place by Labor in 2009 and still govern police actions.
I'm pretty outraged and offended that the Labor Party would use the tragedy of 2 Australians being executed to make what is an incredibly cheap and invalid point.
The Labor Party is seeking to take a cheap political shot. Shame on them.
While an artistic shot of Indonesian President Joko Widodo has been taken down at the National Portrait Gallery.
It seemed to me that I needed to try and follow the mood of the country.
A mood now as empty as the wall. Mark Riley, 7 News.
Sydney property prices have passed another milestone, showing just how unaffordable housing in the city has become. The median price for a house is now more than $900,000. Units, not much better, nearly $610,000. And renters, well, they're not doing it any easier.
This Erskineville two-bedder was set for auction this Saturday.
Another great sale, Lucan. Yeah, strong price.
An investor snapped it up last night.
Just wanted to stop the campaign and put an offer on the table of $1,150,000.
$200,000 over reserve. Australia's median house price rose by 8% in the past year, a better return than stocks or cash. But Sydney growth rose by twice as much. The median house is now worth more than $900,000.
Prices will continue to rise, and of course the next threshold is that $1 million median.
This Ashfield one-bedder is spot on the new median unit price of just over $609,000.
If you want to buy, you should make quick decision, you know.
A rising market hurts too.
Sydney first home buyers are currently at their lowest level on record.
Much of the money in the Sydney real estate market is coming from investors, for example, this property. But all of that extra housing stock isn't necessarily translating into an easier life for all renters. Chad can't find work after a mugging took the sight from one of his eyes. Rent takes more than half his income.
That's why I don't go out. I don't drink, I don't mingle. I just stay here, buy food, and cook for my daughter.
It is a desperate situation if you're looking for somewhere secure and somewhere appropriate.
And that leaves enough to live with dignity. Damien Smith, 7 News.
We can reveal the NRL Grand Final could be staged at the Sydney Football Stadium at Moore Park, following a $900 million redevelopment. It's part of a planned overhaul of Sydney's biggest sporting grounds, including a possible state government deal to take over the Olympic Stadium.
The timing was perfect. Sport's most powerful man inspecting and supporting ANZ Stadium.
Do you think it would still be capable of holding an Olympics in there today?
Yes, I would not see a problem.
The Olympics president says Homebush remains world class, a view shared by John Brogden, who was asked by the Premier to review Sydney stadiums. 7 News understands he told the Premier Allianz at Moore Park should be redeveloped into a 65,000-seat stadium, with Parramatta transformed into a 35,000-seater, while ANZ needs no further taxpayer investment. That's supported by those on the SCG Trust, which oversees Allianz.
You cannot make a case for spending more taxpayers' money on ANZ Stadium. It's pretty simple.
Sports Minister Stuart Ayres declined to comment, but a $900 million Allianz upgrade could give the Wallabies a new base, the NRL a new grand final venue after 2019, while Parramatta would give the Wanderers fans a much improved ground and bring Sydney into line with major interstate redevelopments. Upgrading Allianz above 48,000 would breach the state's contract with ANZ Stadium, but 7 News understands the government is on the verge of an agreement with ANZ to allow it to take over the contract and management for around $100 million. That would allow it to do whatever it wants. The Premier has given the SCG Trust and ANZ Stadium management until mid-May to finalise a deal so it can be included in June's budget. The upgrades will comfortably exceed his $600 million stadium promise. Finding the extra money will be the next battle. Lee Jelisek, 7 News.
Just ahead in Prime7 News, how prison inmates are trying to beat the system and how they're being stopped. And how many more miracles will emerge from the rubble in Nepal as the search for survivors continues. There's renewed hope for families across Nepal after the miracle rescue of a 4-month-old baby boy. Meanwhile, hundreds of locals have taken to the streets of Nepal to protest the slow delivery of earthquake relief, as the official death toll now passes 5,000.
5 days after the quake, shock and despair are giving way to anger. These people are protesting what they say is government inaction. This man wants a bus to his home village, but there's no transport. Rescue teams are still busy though. This Turkish team found 2 men alive, one 39 hours after the quake, the other 62 hours. And this little miracle, a baby boy found 22 hours after his father heard him cry in the rubble. Their family home collapsed in Bhaktapur, just east of Kathmandu. He was taken to hospital and cleared of any injury. But the window of opportunity has closed. Now it's more about body retrieval.
There's a term called golden hours. That's 72 hours after the earthquake, and now it's past that time.
They're not giving up though. Everywhere we travelled, rescuers were digging through the rubble.
The further outside Kathmandu you travel, the worse it seems the damage becomes. Small villages like this one, Sangku, stood no chance against the moving earth. These rescue teams have been unable to access inside this city. The damage so great, the only way to do it safely is with a drone.
Beyond these crumbled walls, dozens of bodies are buried. It will take months to get to them. It's estimated more than half of the houses in this village were reduced to rubble. The rest are uninhabitable. At Australia's embassy, the tents are being packed. Stranded tourists happy to be alive and ready to go.
Certainly hope to head home as soon as possible.
2 Australian C-17s are delivering aid and bringing some Aussies to Bangkok. Others are staying.
Just got dried crackers, different sorts of dried crackers.
Doing their bit to help villagers in the remote Gorkha region.
They don't have food, they don't have anything, so please help the people of Nepal.
Despite shortages, some supermarkets have cautiously reopened. Desperate families risking more aftershocks to get vital supplies. In Kathmandu, Craig Leeson, 7 News.
We rarely see what goes on inside prison walls to control dangerous inmates, but now we can show you what happens when criminals charged with terrorism and bikie offences are locked up.
Deep inside the Silverwater Remand Centre are the cells used to keep some inmates away from the rest, an exercise yard built for one. All to contain violent disputes being played out inside.
Issues like drive-by shootings, we have very spontaneous issues that occur in the community, and they can have a spillover effect into this centre. We have people who can't associate with anybody.
This is where inmates are first screened. 5,000 pass through here each year on their way to court or other jails. Members of outlaw motorcycle gangs or organised crime groups are carefully separated and then closely watched.
Behaviours where there's unusual mixing between inmates, or you might find some offenders might decide to congregate in one particular area or may want to enter a cell as a group.
In a $20 million upgrade, outside yards have been divided with extra surveillance cameras. Here, where inmates mix, can be flashpoints.
Often a simple argument could be escalated very quickly.
This cell is to house inmates categorised as extreme high risk. When they're taken from here, they're dressed in orange, they're handcuffed, their ankles may be shackled, and the movement of other inmates in the centre is restricted. And infrared technology is being installed to keep contraband from getting in, tossed over walls.
Prisoners are getting smarter, and so our job is to make sure we stay ahead of them.
A security crackdown, but one prison authorities admit can't stop all contraband reaching inmates. Chris Marr, 7 News.
There's been a bizarre and fiery exchange at a petrol station in Israel. Well, a man is filling his car with petrol. A woman approaches and asks for a cigarette. He says no, so she comes back and lit the petrol coming out of the Bowser. Now, she's been arrested and charged, and as you can understand, is undergoing psychological assessment. Finance now, and shares fell back again today. The All Ords losing 44 points. CommBank fell below $90. Woolies managed a small rise. Newmont Mining announced it's selling its New Zealand gold mining business and went up. Qantas also took off after a boost in international passenger numbers. The big banks were all lower. And as we turn the page, the Aussie dollar's buying 79.7 US cents. Sports on the way, our first glimpse at Jared Hayne training in the new NFL colours, and you won't believe who was behind the wheel of this car when it doored a pro cyclist.
Tonight's Sport, brought to you by William Hill, online racing and sports betting. William Hill, it's your call.
Tim Sheen has admitted he's nervous about his future as Kangaroos coach heading into the Anzac Test. Australia has lost their past 2 outings against the Kiwis, while torrential rain is forecast for kick-off tomorrow night.
Suncorp Stadium was off limits today as ground staff worked overtime to dry up the surface, and that forced the Kangaroos and Kiwis to train at suburban grounds, adding more disruption to an already frustrating short week.
You spend as much time fitting your uniform and going to lunches and doing media than you do on the training park.
Today's session the only chance for Tim Sheens to get his team ready and earn a contract extension beyond this year.
If I wasn't nervous, I'd be pretty disappointed in myself, to be quite honest.
This is the only time we're going to be playing a test match Australia in the next 12 months, so we want to make the very most of it.
And if form permits, Cameron Smith believes the ageing Kangaroos don't need to push out the door just because they've hit 30.
You know, everyone's saying that Jonathan Thurston's the best player in the game at the moment. You know, he's 32. So really age is not a consideration.
But a third straight loss to the Four Nations champions for the first time since 1953 could see a shake-up.
I'm sure in the back of everyone's mind we don't want that to happen, but it's not used as any motivation tool for us.
So you don't really rely on past results too much. It's definitely a new challenge for us.
The curtain raiser will set the tone. The Gillaroos and Kiwi Ferns picking up where they left off at the Auckland Nines.
I don't think it gets any better than what it's going to be like tomorrow night, even if it is raining. It's a very big deal for us.
Jero Sen, 7 News.
Waratahs coach Michael Checker is thriving on the rivalry with the Brumbies ahead of tomorrow's Super Rugby showdown in Canberra. The defending champions must win to stop the Brumbies from kicking clear in the Australian Conference.
Always when teams know each other, quite well and are often friends off the field, it's that whole syndrome. You want to play backyard footy against your brother. You want to try and bash him more than anybody else.
Meanwhile, the Swans say they must get off to a quick start against the Western Bulldogs on Saturday.
We've got to try and focus on the start this week and making sure that we bring our best from the first bounce, not giving them the head start that we gave Fremantle last weekend.
And the match will be live on 7 Mate on Saturday afternoon. If determination counts for anything, Jared Hayne is well on track to achieve his American football dream. His San Francisco teammates have been impressed with his attitude to learning the game in the countdown to his first big deadline.
In San Francisco's number 38 jersey and helmet, one of rugby league's biggest stars is now just another rookie trying to secure a spot with the 49ers.
Yeah, part of that obviously humbles you, and for me, being in the spotlight from a young age in Australia, it's very refreshing coming over here and just chipping away.
There you go, pad level down. Last one I got for you.
Jared Hayne has already impressed teammates with his speed and ball skills, but it's his gritty determination to get his head around the NFL playbook that has surprised them.
He actually goes out to walk through with his cheat sheet and goes over the plays. That's the first time I ever seen somebody come out there with a sheet of notes.
Even as his teammates are laughing over lunch, the 27-year-old is studying that cheat sheet.
I'll go through a day where it's smooth and I really understand it. Then the next day there's 60, 70 more players. I'm just going, wow, like I haven't even heard half of these players before.
The 49ers will announce their 53-man squad in the first week of September. Jared won't speculate on his chances of making the final cut.
We're only 3 weeks in, so for me, like I said, I'm just taking day by day, taking baby steps at the moment.
He admits he got homesick when storms hit Sydney and he can't find a good coffee. But Jared is happy he walked away from his multi-million-dollar deal with the Parramatta Eels to follow his American dream. In San Francisco, Angela Cox, 7 News.
Australia's Nick Kyrgios is finding top form on clay ahead of next month's French Open. He's through to the quarterfinals of the Estoril Open after a comfortable straight sets victory over Serbian Filip Krajinovic. Kyrgios will now take on Dutch veteran Robin Haase for a spot in the first ATP Tour semi-final. The Aussie pro cycling team Orica Green Edge has tasted success at the Tour of Ramundi, with Michael Albacini winning stage 2. While Denmark's Jesper Hansen must be one of the unluckiest cyclists on tour at the moment. Shortly after crashing, Hansen was then doored by the race doctor's car.
Oh no! Dear, oh dear, oh dear. That, in fact, it's the medical car who's opened his doors, not seen Hansen coming.
Fair dinkum. Albacini won the sprint finish and is now leading the race by 10 seconds. Well, that is the night in sport. Weather's next, and thanks to Daniel in Gippsland for this photo. I don't think the East Coast will look this calm tomorrow. We'll have all the details next.
Tonight's weather brought to you by Baker's Delight. Freshly baking every day.
Good evening, Michael Hansen with you once again. The East Coast is on flood watch at the moment from southern Queensland all the way down to Taree, with increasing rain and storms due to a trough that's looking to become an East Coast low. It meant that our overnight temperatures have become a little bit warmer with increased cloud cover around as well. Now that East Coast low will form just off the southern Queensland coast on Saturday. It'll cause those massive falls right down the coastline, resulting in some possible flash flooding and some river flooding as well. Now once we get to the end of your weekend, we're expecting that damaging system to move further east, sparing the southern coastline those massive falls that they saw last week. Through the next 4 days is when we're likely to see the heaviest falls through New South Wales. We can see in the north around Tweed Heads and Byron Bay is where we can expect anywhere between 200 to 400 millimetres of rain in the next 4 days. In fact, in the 24 hours to 9 a.m. this morning, we saw massive falls of up to 100 millimetres around Lennox Head and Ballina as well. Those falls won't be as great as we head further inland. However, across the northern ranges, we could see upwards of 50 millimetres, and across the northwest of New South Wales, we're expecting anywhere between 20 to 40 millimetres, which isn't a huge amount over 4 days, but there's certainly a few people crying out for rain, so every little bit helps. Tomorrow, the southwest should remain fine and sunny with maximum temperatures towards the mid-20s. Our daytime maximums will cool off in the north of the state. However, we can be thankful that tonight will be just a little bit warmer, Dan.
Well, let's hope that rain doesn't eventuate. That's a lot, 300. Wow. Thank you, Michael. We'll see you again tomorrow. That is your news for this Thursday, the last day of April. Thanks so much again for your company. Tomorrow is May. I'm Daniel Gibson. Till I see you again. Have a great night. Bye for now.